Okay, so then now that we're ready to go ahead and code in our CSS, we need to add links to the files that we've created. So I have an app.css, which is where I'm going to be putting all my personal styles for this page. And then of course we have this HTML doctor reset, which resets everything. We talked about that in the first week. So back in our HTML, we're going to go ahead and inside the head tag, I'm just going to go ahead and put in those two links to those two files. So now we have our HTML file hooked up to our CSS files. The next thing we need to do is inside of this page, if you remember, we downloaded this page ruler add-on for Chrome. And what I'm going to use it for now is I'm going to use it to go ahead and measure out this header and figure out how big it needs to be. So I already know that this header area is going to be 100% of my window. So I know the height, or I know the width. But what I need to figure out is how tall it needs to be. And I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball it, and I'll go ahead and draw this out with the page ruler. And it gives me an approximate height, or that's probably the exact height, of 100 pixels. So now I can go into my CSS, and I know that this header encompasses all of the elements inside of it. So in the CSS, I can go ahead and create a style for that header. And I know that the width is going to be 100% because I want it to take up the whole width of my browser window. And the height is about 100 pixels. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And the other thing that I want to take a look at here is, if you notice, I have a background image in that header. And that is one of the files that I have inside my image folder. It's called the branding background, or branding BG. I'm going to go ahead and add in my background. And I'm going to use shorthand for this. So it takes different values here. The first value is the background color. I'm going to make mine transparent. The next one is the URL to the image that you're trying to link to. Now, I'm in my CSS file, which is inside the CSS folder, which is inside the library folder. So the path, I actually need to get out of my CSS file folder, which is a ... that brings me up one level. I need to get out of that CSS, and now I need to get out of the lib folder. So I go up one more level, and then now I need to go into my image folder. So now I add my image folder, and then the file that I'm going to is called brandingbg.jpg. Now the next value is the x-axis, where I want that image to show up. I want it to show up on the 0 point of the x-axis, and the next value is the y-axis. I want that to show up on the 0 point of the y-axis. And then the last value is how I want this to repeat. I can choose to do a no repeat, or in this case, I do want it to repeat. So I'm going to go ahead and type in repeat. Now if you take a look at the layout that we have in Chrome, at the very bottom of this header we have a light gray line or border. So let's go back to our CSS and let's go ahead and add that in. So border bottom, it's going to be 1 pixel solid, and I think that gray is 999, so I'm going to go ahead and use that for now. What I can do though is use my eyedropper tool and then pick the color from the web page, and as I scroll down here, or as I hover over this different color here, once I find out what that is, I can click on it. It automatically saves it to my clipboard, and I can go back in here and paste that color in, and it will match it exactly. So now I can go back into Chrome, go to my header project, and refresh, and you can see that the background is there along with that border. And of course my elements are over here, but they're not styled yet, so I need to go back in and figure out where I need to put all of these elements. So the first thing, if we go back to the page, take a look at what we have. We have the logo here, which has a red background. and using our page ruler again, I can figure out how wide that is. It's about 98 pixels wide, and the height's, I'm not concerned about the height right now because it's going to take on the height of whatever the header is. So let's go ahead, and while we're in this page, let's get the background color. Okay, so back into our CSS. If we take a look at the HTML, now we're styling the div class logo. So back into our CSS. I always like to make it very specific, so I add in the header, and the header we're looking for a div with a logo, or a class of logo. From here, the width is going to be, what was it? Let's make it 100 pixels just to make it easy. The height is going to be 100 pixels. And the background is that value that we just copied and pasted. So let's go ahead and save that. Go back to our document, our web page, and refresh it. And now you can see that we have that logo set up. The next thing we need to do is we need to go back into this web page and figure out how we're going to position these, the campus div, which is the Indiana University Kokomo, and the department div. Okay, so this is where using this page ruler comes in handy again. I'm just going to go ahead and draw a box around this IU Kokomo text, and this tells me right away that from the left edge, this space here, I'm about 109 pixels, and from the top of the page, I'm about 10 pixels. So I can use these coordinates in my CSS to go ahead and position those elements. So the first thing that I need to do here is go ahead and create the style for it. So the header with a div or a class of campus is going to be positioned absolute, and from the top it's going to be 10 pixels, and from the left it's going to be about 109 pixels, but I'm going to go ahead and round it off at 110 pixels. Now, one of the things to be careful about here is that the position is set to absolute. Well, it's set to absolute for the page, for this entire page itself, okay? But we only want it to be relative to the header area. So what I need to do is I need to go into my CSS, and in the header tag, or the header style, I need to say position relative, because I want all of the elements that are inside of it to be positioned relative to me, basically relative to the header. That's what that position relative style corresponds to. So now, position absolute, but it's going to be absolute to the header tag. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so back into our document here, or our web page. What we need to do is we need to go in, we need to make sure that the text matches up to the text in the document. So if we go ahead and refresh what we have so far, you can see that the IU Kokomo text is positioned where I'd like it to be, but the text should be all caps. So what I can do is I can go ahead and use my property inspector in Chrome and do a text transform, uppercase, and then from here I can play around with the font size to try and get the exact size that I want it to be. So I'm going to use M units, which is a relative unit based on the font size of the body. So we never set a body font size in our CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and go up here and add in one more style, and the font size is going to be 16 pixels. So now all of my M units, for instance this 1.5 M's, corresponds to that body style which I just set to 16 pixels. So 1.5 M's is equal to 16 pixels times 1.5, 24 pixels. If I change this to 2, now we're looking at a font size of 32 pixels, but I think that's a little bit too big for this page. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with 1.5 ems. So now I can go ahead and take those two styles and copy that to my header campus style in my style sheet. Go ahead and save that. Go back to my page and refresh. I shouldn't see any changes, but you can see that my styles are now included here.